Welcome to our academic symposio of Grupo Sharafi.
Buenos días, bienvenidos todos a nuestro simposio académico de Grupo Sharafi.
My name is Yanelin Aguilar, and I am one of the leaders of Grupo Sharafi and a secretary and master of ceremonies. Hola, mi nombre es Yanelin Aguilar, soy uno de los líderes de Grupo Sharafi y la secretaria y maestra de ceremonias.
Hola, mi nombre es Wilber Tomás, soy el maestro de ceremonias en español y diseñador de la página web. Hi, my name is Wilbert Tomas. I am the master of ceremonies and the designer of the webpage.
Speak up, please. Speak up so the back can hear you. Speak up.
Yep. Hola, mi nombre es William Sigüencia. Soy uno de los líderes del grupo Sharafi. Mi trabajo fue investigador. Hi, my name is William Sigüencia. I am one of the leaders of Group Sharafi. My work was investigator. I had to look up on the internet about gender inequality.
Hola, mi nombre es Daniela Lunas. Yo soy la escritora y secretaria del Grupo Sharafi. Hi, my name is Daniela Luna. I'm the secretary and the writer of Group Sharafi.
Hola, mi nombre es Luis Casales. Yo soy investigador y fotógrafo del Grupo Sharafi. Hi, my name is Luis. I was investigating photographer of the Group Sharafi.
Hola, mi nombre es Eric Alonso. Yo soy el escritor y Relaciones Públicas. Hi, my name is Eric Alonso. I am the writer in the public relations of Group Sharafi.
Hola, mi nombre es Brian Medell. Yo soy el fotógrafo y diseñador de la página web del Grupo Sharafi. Hi, my name is Brian Medell, and I'm one of the photographers and the designer of the PowerPoint.
Hola, mi nombre es Luis Novoa. Yo soy el diseñador de la página web del Grupo Sharafi. Hi, my name is Luis Novoa. I'm the designer of the webpage of Group Sharafi.
Today in our presentation, we will be talking about gender equality and the importance of gender inequality.
Hoy en nuestra presentación vamos a estar hablando acerca de la igualdad de género y la importancia de esta igualdad.
The main topic is by changing gender inequality, we can overcome sexism, machismo, and sexual identity norms.
El tema principal es que al cambiar la desigualdad de género podemos superar el sexismo, el machismo y las normas de identidad sexual.
Gender equality is the idea and situation that a woman and men should be equal, but they're not. Gender inequality refers to unequal treatment or precipitations of individuals wholly or partly due to their gender. It rises from differences in gender roles.
La igualdad de género es la idea y la situación en que las mujeres y los hombres deben ser iguales, pero no lo son. La desigualdad de género se refiere al trato desigual o las percepciones de personas en todo o en parte debido a su género que surge de las diferencias en los roles de género.
One example of gender equality movement is feminism. Feminism is a range of political movement, ideologies, and social movements that share a common role to define, establish, and achieve political, economic, personal, and social equality of sexes. This includes seeking to establish education and professional opportunities for women that are equal for those for men.
Un ejemplo de movimiento de igualdad de género es el feminismo. El feminismo es una gama de movimientos políticos, ideologías y movimientos sociales que comparten un objetivo común: definir, establecer y lograr la igualdad política, económica y personal y social de los sexos. Esto incluye buscar oportunidades educativas y profesionales para mujeres que sean iguales a las de los hombres.
This video is an example of how gender inequality has affected women and how gender inequality doesn't make sense on any level. Promoting gender equality can reduce extreme poverty and hunger and promote shared prosperity for girls and boys, women and men around the world.
Este video es un ejemplo de cómo la desigualdad de género ha afectado a las mujeres y cómo la desigualdad de género no tiene sentido en ningún nivel. Promover la igualdad de género puede reducir la pobreza extrema y hambre y impulsar la prosperidad compartida para niños y niñas, mujeres y hombres en todo el mundo.
Regardless of where you live, gender equality is a fundamental human right. Advancing gender equality is critical to all areas of a healthy society, from reducing poverty to promoting health education, protection, and the well-being of girls and boys.
Independientemente del lugar donde vivamos, la igualdad de género es un derecho humano fundamental. Promover la igualdad ámbitos de una sociedad sana hasta la promoción de la salud, la educación, la protección y el bienestar de las niñas y los niños.
In 2014, 143 countries had granted equality between men and women in their constitutions, but other 52 countries had not yet made this important change.
En 2014, 143 países tenían garantizada en sus constituciones la igualdad entre hombres y mujeres, pero otros 52 países aún no habían contraído este importante cambio.
Girls in Africa, Oceania, and West Asia continue to have difficulty enrolling in both elementary and high school.
Las niñas de África, Oceania y Asia, según tenido dificultades para matricularse tanto en la escuela primaria como en la escuela secundaria.
Empowering women and girls is key to boosting growth and promoting social development.
El empoderamiento de las mujeres y las niñas es fundamental para impulsar el crecimiento y promover el desarrollo social.
35% of women worldwide have suffered physical and or sexual violence on the hands of their partners and or other people as well.
El 35% de mujeres de todo el mundo ha sufrido violencia física y o sexual a manos de sus parejas y o a manos de otras personas.
How can we make a change? We can demand the United Nations put pressure on the countries to give women the right to go to school as well. Teach guys and girls better sexual education. Empower mothers. Give women more jobs and give women the same pay as men for the same jobs.
¿Cómo podemos hacer un cambio? Podemos exigir que las Naciones Unidas presionen a los países para que den a las mujeres el derecho de ir a la escuela, les enseñen mejor educación sexual, empoderen a las madres, dar más ejemplos a las mujeres y otorguen a las mujeres el mismo salario que los hombres por los mismos trabajos.
What we can do to fix this issue is if you're a girl, you can stay in school. Help empower your female classmates to do the same, as well as fighting for your rights to access sexual and reproductive health services.
Lo que podemos hacer para solucionar este problema es que si eres una niña, puedes permanecer en la escuela, ayudar a empoderar a tus compañeras de clase para que hagan lo mismo y luchar por tu derecho a acceder a los servicios de salud sexual y reproductiva.
If you're a woman, you can address unconditional basis and implement associations that can form an unintended and often visible barrier to equal opportunities.
Si eres una mujer, puedes abordar sus egos inconscientes y las asociaciones implícitas que pueden formar un barrera involuntario y a menudo invisible para la igualdad de oportunidades.
If you're a man or a boy, you can work alongside women and girls to achieve gender equality and embrace healthy, respectful relationships.
Si eres hombre o niño, puedes trabajar junto a las mujeres y las niñas para lograr la igualdad de género y mantener con ellas relaciones respetuosas y saludables.
The goal is to achieve gender equality for men and women.
La meta es lograr igualdad de género para hombres y mujeres.
Machismo is having an unusually high or exaggerated sense of masculinity. These men believe that strength, sexual powers, and control is the measure of someone's manliness.
El machismo tiene un sentido de masculinidad inusualmente alto o exagerado. Estos hombres creen que la fuerza, los poderes sexuales y el control son la medida de hombría de alguien.
All around the world, women have been sexually abused by men because they think they have more rights than women.
Alrededor del mundo, las mujeres han sido abusadas sexualmente por los hombres porque creen que tienen más derechos que las mujeres.
Almost 1/3 of women have been in a relationship report that they have experienced some form of physical and or sexual violence by their intimate partner in their lifetime.
Casi un tercio de las mujeres que han estado en una relación informan que han experimentado alguna forma de violencia física y o sexual por parte de su pareja íntima durante su vida.
38% of murders of women are committed by a male intimate partner.
El 38% de asesinatos de mujeres son cometidos por un compañero íntimo varón.
Now we will talk about our star, Layla Sharafi.
Ahora vamos a hablar sobre nuestra estrella Layla Sharafi.
Layla currently works as a gender specialist at the United Nations Population Fund. Layla manages global intimacy centered on supporting women and girls' empowerment, particularly in the context of sexual and reproductive health, as well as engagement of men and boys for the promoting of gender equality. She has worked on these issues at the United Nations for nearly a decade.
El trabajo de Layla es especialista de género en el Fondo de la Población de las Naciones Unidas. Layla gestiona iniciativas globales centradas en apoyar el empoderamiento de mujeres y niñas, particularmente en el contexto de salud sexual y reproductiva, así como la participación de hombres y niños para la promoción de igualdad de género. Ella ha trabajado en estos temas en las Naciones Unidas durante casi una década.
The experience and training at SGPIN influenced Layla's decision to force her career in addressing challenges related to inequalities with a particular force on gender equality and promoting social justice and human rights within global policy and advocating programs.
La experiencia académica en SGPIA influyeron en la decisión de Layla de encontrar su carrera en abordar los desafíos relacionados con las desigualdades con un enfoque particular en la desigualdad de género y promover la justicia social y los derechos humanos dentro de los programas globales de políticos y abogacía.
In her own words, Layla says her experience at SPGIN underscored how a wide array of actors and actions shape the world today and encourage critical thinking about international affairs.
En sus propias palabras, Layla dice que su experiencia en SGPIA subrayó como una amplia gama de actores y acciones moldean el mundo de hoy y fomentan el pensamiento crítico sobre los asuntos internacionales.
Any questions?
What made you guys think of this idea?
Well,
Repeat the question into the microphone. Thank you.
she said what made us pick this idea. So basically, Layla, well, when Mr. Minoto gave us Layla, La Señora Layla, we like investigated about her and we found out that she was a gender specialist. So we started like gathering our information about her and like seeing how that's a big impact in our community today.
Do you know when she started her community?
I think she's well since she, when she started her her community. Well, she was born into since she's from Afghanistan, she was born into gender equality. So I guess that made her promote to like bring it out and help others. We've sent emails and we've been talking to her and asking her questions about what made her do this decision and how her life was back then.
Explícales que ya para
Oh, and she's also coming. You guys are all invited because she's coming March 25th to come here and speak. I mean, April 25th. She's coming here to speak. Actually, she doesn't know how to speak Spanish. She only speaks English. But the thing is that we talk to her in English, so.
Young woman, if you're referring to about the class, it is what I call Herencia Latina 3. It's Spanish for Spanish speakers 3. So it's part of the actual curricula. So I think that's what you're asking, yes? Yes, it's part of the curricula. So in essence, yes, you would need to be able to have your level of Spanish a little higher in whatever it may be. Because as you can tell, they put in a lot of effort in Spanish as well. Excuse me.
If you think about it, like, if you know anyone, like,
repeat the question.
oh, she said if we can, like, can you repeat it?
If we should worry about this in the United
She said if we should worry about this in the United States. I think we should because a lot of people and a lot of women have been sexually abused by men, and they don't speak out to it, and they just like keep quiet. And for us, we should support the women that have been sexually abused by men. She said, how does she change our perspective in everyday school? Well, if you think about it, just knowing that like she deals with these cases every day and like listens to different people talk about their experiences and like what they went through, it's kind of rough. And then there's us, that we can make a change in like our community and help her. She said, do you think girls could be abusive to men? I mean, they could, because there's also, like, just to be a man doesn't mean you have to be abusive, because not all men are abusive, but there is some girls that are abusive to guys. Is there anything else that women are below men? Well, some women can't get jobs because they prefer that men get more jobs than women and get more pay, since like women aren't capable of doing what men can, but in reality they are. In this country, I'm not. Oh, she said if there's any laws that protect women from not getting married girls getting married at like a young age. Well, in some countries there's no law, so you can be like 12 or 14 and you can be married with like an older guy. But like in this country, I didn't investigate about that, and I'm not sure.
Depends on the state.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, like he said, it depends on the state.
Como estudiantes, como trabajamos en... La pregunta era como estudiantes, ¿cómo hacemos el cambio de género, no? Pues podemos como dar más oportunidades a los como mujeres y los niñas, porque hoy en día también en las escuelas dan más preferencia a los colegios altos, dan más preferencias a los mujeres, los hombres que las mujeres, y podemos ¿cómo se dice? Podemos escribir a los colegios, podemos, como estudiantes, podemos tratar nosotros iguales, como si no, porque todo empieza con ustedes, con nosotros. Si tratamos todos iguales, tal vez en el vida real podemos cumplir eso también.
She said if we find this topic difficult, well, the project in general is a lot of work. You have to be really committed into it and do a lot of investigation, talk to your the star you got, and like be very into your topic and know what you're talking about.
Did he make that video?
No, I got it offline.
Question.
Oh, if I made the video, I said no, I got it offline.
Quiero agradecer a los profesores que trajeron sus clases, Ms. Buti, la señora Buti, la señora Master Mijales, la señora Lee, la señora Jordan, la señorita Jordan, señora Salazar, gracias por venir. I would like to extend my gratitude for the teachers who came with your classes, Ms. Buti, señora Master Mijales, Ms. Lee, Ms. Jordan, as well as la señora Salazar. Thank you, students, also for being here, paying attention. Really appreciate it. Grupo Sharafi 2018 appreciates it as well. They put a lot of time and effort in developing this academic symposium. Mil gracias a todos que vinieron, de las clases de los profesores que apenas, o profesoras que apenas nombré, que el Grupo Sharafi ha puesto bastante trabajo en este simposio académico del 2018. No se olviden que están ustedes cordialmente invitados de regresar aquí el 24 de abril, 25 de abril, para conocer a la señora Leila Sharafi, que vendrá ese día, periodo 3. So don't forget that you're cordially invited to attend the second half of the symposium on April 25th, same time here in this classroom. And again, thank you very much for your attention. And then I would like to say thank you to Senor Shepard, who has always been here to give us a video library. I'll give him a little prop. You can go to the school website and you go to his page, you'll see all the videos that he's put together, compiled in the past 14 years. 10, 11, 12, 15. Anyway, so yes, it's in the school website. So if you're interested in seeing more of the topics or themes that we've, that our students, your classmates have produced all the years, please go up there and see that. And it's been beautifully crafted and edited by Senor John Shepard. So thank you very much. I would like to give a gratitude to the Grupo Sharafi 2018. Okay. And please give yourselves a round of applause because you're great. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to our second part of Academic Simposio. Buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos a nuestra segunda parte del simposio académico. Today we will be presenting our Latin star, Layla Sharafi. Hoy día vamos a presentar nuestra estrella latina, Layla Sharafi.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Hi. So great to see faces so early in the morning. Welcome. Thanks so much for your attention. My name is Layla Sharafi, and it's an honor and pleasure to be here this morning. I'm so pleased. I love talking to young people, and you're the future. So I'm really, really honored to be here, and I hope you'll find this presentation interesting. I'll present for a little bit, and then we'll have a discussion. And feel free to interrupt me at any point, and hope to have plenty of time for question and answer, because I think that's where it gets really interesting, is when we can have a dialogue. So thanks again, and as I said, I'm Layla, and I work for the UN. I work for the United Nations. The UN is made up of about 52 different agencies, give or take, so we're a very big entity. I work for the UN Population Fund, and it's an organization that works on public health globally, women's rights, what we call population issues. So we talk a lot about climate change. We also talk about population dynamics like migration and different issues. But specifically, I'm going to focus on, come on in guys, welcome. I'm going to talk about gender inequality. And I'm going to talk about it from a global perspective, because I work for the UN and I'm posted in New York headquarters, which means my work doesn't focus on a particular region or country. My work focuses on global kind of perspective. So gender inequality lately has been in the news quite a bit. And in the mainstream media, which I'll talk about in my presentation, and I think all of you can also relate and contribute to that conversation. First of all, as well, I'd like to thank the team that put together the project on gender inequality, and I have everyone's names here. I just want to read them out real quick. Sophia, Eric, Brian, William, Daniela, Wilbur, Luis, and Luis. So you guys did a great presentation and project. I was looking over some of the work that you put together, including statistics, and you really did a great job. I was very impressed. So this is going to echo a few of the statistics that you had in your presentation, but I'd like to just give you a broad overview of what the reality is, some of the challenges that we talk about when we're talking about gender inequality. How many of you have heard of the phrase gender inequality? Yeah, I mean, it's a term that basically talks about, the difference that women and girls and men and boys sort of face and the realities that they face. Hope you can see this. It's essentially starting out with a bunch of different statistics. Gender inequality, a global picture. The undeniable reality is that gender-based discrimination hinders human rights, poverty reduction, and development. In my line of work, we talk a lot about development. So ensuring that countries and their populations within countries have access to all the opportunities and can benefit from economic development, social development, etc. But we know that when gender-based discrimination exists, it hinders these things. This is a really crazy statistic, and I'm always stunned by it. 1 out of 3 women in the world still face the risk of being beaten, coerced into sex, or abused in some other way, and typically by someone she knows, and typically her partner or a man that she typically knows. Women and girls are disproportionately affected by conflict, so whenever there's a natural disaster or a war or some kind of crises, we see a lot of different problems emerge because the social fabric, as they call it, falls apart. And we know statistically that sexual violence and physical violence towards women and girls increases in these kinds of chaotic crisis situations. We also know, and this number is constantly changing, but quite a large number of girls before the age of 20 have, when they've interviewed them, have reported experiencing some kind of sexual abuse before they've reached the age of 20. Shifting a little bit to a different kind of statistic, only 22% of women worldwide represent parliamentarians. So think about that as a global aggregate. It means that if you had 100 parliamentarians, or in this country what would be like congresswomen or congressmen, only 22% out of 100 are women. Girls are less likely to enter and stay in school, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in a few slides. We know that before the age of 18, more than a third of women in a lot of developing countries are married off before they reach the age of 18, which we call that child marriage or early marriage. Which means that, you know, they may end up having children very young, end up not going on to finish their studies or even university, which affects, of course, their life course and their career opportunities, etc. We also know that boys face, let's say, physical violence before they reach the age of 15. So whether that's corporal punishment or physical, fights or any kind of physical abuse, let's say within their families, we also know that boys are treated more harshly in a lot of contexts. So they're also facing some of the things that we talk about in terms of violence. This one's a little hard to see because it's on the blue, but I do want to talk about the fact that gender inequality affects women and girls disproportionately. But we also know that gender stereotypes and the way that boys are socialized into believing they have to be tough, strong, aggressive, not have emotions, also affects them. It doesn't allow them to enjoy a full range of emotions. They can also engage in risky behavior, whether it's, showing off, driving fast, having many sexual partners, not practicing safe sex, whatever it may be, having to exert their strength also affects them. And that's what we mean by harmful gender norms, also impact boys, which will become future men. And, how they treat women and girls and partners in the future can also be detrimental, right? So that's all related to harmful gender norms, stereotypes. So this is kind of a very broad overview of some of the statistics. But hey, not all news is grim. There's some positive news, and I want to talk about that. We know that many more girls are in school, I'm talking worldwide, than 15, 20 years ago. So in the developing region, we know that, meaning in developing countries, we know as a whole, the number of girls that have entered primary school, which is elementary school, has increased. In fact, we have very good numbers now, as opposed to 20, 25 years ago, where you would see a very big difference in ratio between boys and girls that are in school. For example, in Southern Asia, but we see the same statistics for Africa and Latin America, 74 girls were enrolled in primary school for every 100 boys. Now we know that 103 girls are enrolled for every 100 boys. So that's actually changed quite a bit. And we see this very, very commonly throughout the world. But notice, it's primary school. So what we find is that girls will enter primary school, but then to make it to secondary school, which is like junior high, high school, as we call it in this country, they start to drop out for different reasons. But at least we have the primary level almost equal, if not exceeding at this point. We also know that these two statistics talk about employment and women in basically paid labor. We know that 41% of paid workers, that's not talking about agriculture or farming industry, has increased by 35% since 1990, which is not that long ago if you think about it. So what does that mean? It means that, around the world, women are always working. But the issue may be that they're in informal labor, which means it's not official, it's not linked to taxes, it's not linked to benefits, it's not linked to Social Security. So they're vulnerable. If their employer wants to exploit them, it's very easy to do. If she loses, she doesn't have the ability to go to the market and sell her goods or work in any other kind of informal labor, she doesn't have the protections of Social Security or unemployment benefits. So it's a very vulnerable situation. So what it means is that more women are joining the formal labor market, which is good for them. Let's see. Women have gained ground. Again, that 22% of parliamentarians I talked about. We see that of the 174 countries that presented data over the last 20 years, we see quite a bit of, again, improvement. This last one, which is very hard to see, I'm sorry, I'll read it out to you. It's in the blue in tiny print. Young men are more open to equitable gender norms. What does that mean? So surveys from around the world show that young men are much more receptive to challenging gender stereotypes, typical roles that are assigned for women and girls. They're much more receptive to, let's say, participating and helping in household chores or helping raise children, helping rear children, much more open to those ideas than their father's generation or their grandfather's generation. So it means that things are changing. It means that young men and women are starting to challenge a lot of these ideas about what a woman should typically do, what a man should typically do. And so, in my line of work, we see this as a very positive experience. Here's what's going on right now. And I'm sure many of you have heard of the Me Too movement. How many of you have heard of #MeToo? Raise your hands. #MeToo? I know more of you have heard of Me Too. No? Okay. So it's a movement that's been spurred and helped by social media. And essentially, it's a movement to raise awareness and take action against sexual violence and harassment, either in the workplace or different spaces. And it was actually a term that was coined by Tarana Burke, who is a social activist. She started an organization many years ago called Just Be. Basically tries to ensure that survivors of violence, whether it's, intimate partner violence or what we call domestic violence or sexual violence or rape, have access to services, especially women and girls who are most marginalized, who come from who live in contexts of poverty or have different levels of discrimination that they're facing. So I was thinking, this is it's mostly a U.S. phenomenon, this whole Me Too thing. So when I was doing research, I realized that the term Me Too, #MeToo, was searched for on Google in 196 countries. I know, I was pretty shocked by that. What does that mean? It means that that's almost all the countries in the world. There's like 200 countries in the world, which means, this is gaining some momentum, this awareness about the reality. So like when I talk to my husband or my friends talk to their partners about, the things that women worry about, whether it's walking alone on the street and it's dark, you have to pay a little bit more attention than maybe your male counterpart. And when you get into your car, you sort of, and it's at night, you check to see if anyone's around, or, you're much more aware of your safety and the things that are just kind of ingrained in us as women that men don't really think about, right? And they sort of just take for granted. And I think the fact that so many women came out on social media and said, me too, I have faced sexual violence or harassment at some point in my life, shocked so many men because they thought, wow, this is a huge problem. And when we talk about that statistic of 1 out of 3 women face some kind of violence or abuse, that became very real in a lot of people's minds, because now they realize that this is much more prevalent than we thought, or at least men. Because women sort of knew, right? So Time's Up, hashtag Time's Up. Now this is a US movement connected to Me Too. It's not so much a movement as it is an organization that was started by 300 women in Hollywood, including very high-profile leaders such as Reese Witherspoon, I think Nicole Kidman, some of these other very, high-powered A-list celebrities, to try to take this Me Too kind of momentum and make it into concrete action. So it's an organization that's trying to raise awareness, raise money so that women can sort of take legal action or have more services to be safer in the workplace, and also have more safety, but also be free of harassment and these kinds of things. So both of these have ignited this larger conversation about gender inequality, which is connected to the reality that women and girls face, and et cetera. I was shocked because, again, as somebody who's been working on this issue for like 15 years, my whole career, in the mainstream media, which these are the kinds of things that are never talked about in the mainstream media. A week ago, I was watching 60 Minutes. How many of you know about 60 Minutes? It's a TV show on Sunday nights. And there was a long, huge piece about gender pay, gender pay gap, so the equal pay conversation, that studies show and evidence shows that a woman and a man in a corporate job, or most organizations, even if it's public sector, the woman for doing the exact same job will get 75% compared to 100% of pay that the man gets for doing exactly the same job. And this is a phenomenon that continues even in this country. And so the CEO of Salesforce, how many of you have heard of Salesforce? It's a huge company that administers services to other IT companies. I actually wasn't very familiar with it because it's not my line of work, but apparently it's like a multi-billion-dollar corporation. The CEO of Salesforce couldn't believe that in his company, which is a huge company, women were still getting paid for doing the same work as men. So he did an assessment of his company, and he found that this was the reality. I think it was something like 80 cents to every dollar women were getting paid versus men. So he decided to change this. He wanted to make the pay gap equal, and it cost his organization $3 million to bring that up to sort of, get women paid the same amount as men in his company. So this is starting to raise awareness amongst big corporations in the United States. It's changing people's sort of mindsets about, or making them more aware of this reality. I also saw last week in USA Today, which is a very mainstream, I would say, newspaper in the United States. I mean, I saw an online version of it, of a glossary of terms on feminism and gender equality. And that's everything from, LGBTI issues, cisgender, trans, gender roles, everything that you could think of. This glossary of terms appeared in USA Today, which is a mainstream, news outlet, and I was shocked because this is something that would have never happened, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even maybe a year ago. But I think there's an increased discussion about feminism and these kinds of things. And the last wave we really saw was in this country was like in the 1960s and 70s, where women were fighting for equality in the family, the right to use contraception, these kinds of discussions. And Time Person of the Year was the Silence Breakers. And here's the cover of that magazine, Person of the Year. It's usually person, they pick one person, but this time they decided they would choose the Silence Breakers. There's a group of women who represent women who have been more openly talking about the issues that they face, like harassment and violence. And there you have Taylor Swift, I think, who talked about, some harassment that she had faced, Ashley Judd, all of them. But my point is the fact that it's coming up in USA Today, 60 Minutes, Time Magazine, it means that there's a greater awakening in our society about these issues. Addressing gender inequality in development. So this is more like in line with what I do at my job at the UN. There's all these different frameworks that governments have signed on to say we're going to make sure that women and men are treated equally in our societies. Whether it's this convention, which is international law, many countries have signed on to this, and different frameworks like the ICPD Program of Action, Beijing Platform for Action. Again, they're consensus documents that governments have signed on to say, we're going to make this society equal. The Beijing conference, by the way, was the famous conference where the famous quote by the First Lady of the United States at that time, who was Hillary Clinton, said, "Women's rights are human rights." How many of you have heard that slogan? So this was where the term was coined by Hillary, who was the First Lady at the time. And that was at this Beijing conference where many countries said, okay, we're going to try to make this an equal situation. Gender mainstreaming, it's a term that was coined about 15, 20 years ago. How organizations and companies were going to try to build in more structures that would help, whether it's in companies or organizations or in governments, more attention to how women and girls could be, their issues could be more addressed equally. And this is basically a definition which I won't bore you with, but basically that's the idea, is that all policies, programs, laws should consider gender inequality. This is just something that we use in my field of work. Not all gender programs are created equal. We have gender exploitative programs, gender neutral, gender sensitive, gender transformative. This is kind of the gold standard. We want to promote programs, whether it's through public health programs or through education, programs that get men and women and boys and girls to challenge some of these gender stereotypes and norms that they have been exposed to or socialized with. So for example, you might have a public health campaign that encourages men to go with their girlfriends or wives to get prenatal checkups when they're pregnant. Now, if he comes in with her, you have a captive audience. You can talk to him or hand him a pamphlet or invite him to a workshop or a class about how he can help be a better partner by helping take care of the baby when it arrives, or helping in household chores, or sharing the responsibilities. So that would be an example of a program that has one intention but also tries to raise awareness and sensitize men and women about how equal sharing of responsibilities is something they might want to consider if they're not doing it already, which they may be. But different UN agencies, I just thought it might be interesting for you to see. UN Women is the UN agency that works primarily on women and girls empowerment and promoting gender equality. UN Development Program, which is one of the largest UN agencies in the world, they work very much on stronger governance, so fighting corruption, strengthening government institutions, mostly poverty reduction. They're the people that help and support governments in sort of strengthening their macroeconomic policies and so forth. They also work a lot on environment and energy, so climate change issues. But within that, they're also mainstreaming gender issues throughout all of these different sectors. UNICEF, everyone's heard of UNICEF, equal treatment of boys and girls throughout the world. UNFPA, which is where I work, we work a lot on gender-based violence issues, women's reproductive rights, etc. We use a human rights-based approach. Basically what that means is the individual is at the center of our work, meaning they have the right to decide when, how, what they want to do. And they should have the education, the information, and services to actualize whatever they want to do. We have one principle that's very important in this approach, which is do no harm. So through our programs, we have to make sure that whatever programs we're developing, we have no unintended consequences that are negative. So we have to be very careful that we're not, in a community where we're setting up an intervention or some kind of program, we don't have a consequence that's harmful. So do no harm is a very important principle in the human rights-based approach, which the entire UN uses. These are just human rights instruments, which are basically, these are all international conventions that governments have signed on to that say, look, we're gonna institute a range of things to ensure everyone has the right to whatever it may be, whether it's education, employment, health. So these are just some conventions. More about the conventions, which I won't go into. What do we do as UNFPA? The main thing I want to just express here, and how the issue of gender inequality and the work I do, which is very much focused on reproductive rights. If you think about the fact that, what we say is that when a woman and girl has the ability to make decisions about her body, about her life choices, when she wants to get into a relationship, when she's ready for, any kind of relationship, when she's ready to get married, when she's ready to have children, how many children to have, having those conversations with her partner are critical. And if she doesn't have that control as a first step, then it's very hard for her to be able to actualize other forms of empowerment, whether it's going on to finish her studies or going on to university if she, wants to do that, or have a career. So economic empowerment or political empowerment, if she ever wants to run for political office, for example, or be a leader in her community, can be very challenging if firstly she didn't have that right or that ability to control her life course or her own body. So we talk about reproductive rights as a kind of a broad term for all of those issues. When and if to get married, when and if to have children, how many, with whom, and have conversations with her partner freely about those things. So it's very much connected to equality and women and girls empowerment. One thing I've worked on a lot, and I noticed this in your presentation about engaging men and boys. So men and boys play a critical role in all of this. They're the ones in most instances that hold a lot of power, whether it's in government, whether it's in corporations, whether it's at the household level. So it's really important that they join this fight for gender equality and support their sisters, support their daughters, to have all of the opportunities that they've had or that they would want them to have. So it's something that my organization has worked very closely on when we're talking about promoting gender equality. And sometimes this can be a little contentious because women's rights activists have said, we fought so hard to have a space and to sort of take control or have some space and sort of shift the balance of power, and now you want to sort of bring men back into the conversation. But if you want to have genuine progress, I think you have to have the entire society working together. And many experts agree to this. So this is something that we've done in my line of work, engaging men and boys. A little illustration of what we've done around the world. In West Africa, we have something called École de Mari, which in French translates to husband's school. So in villages, fathers and husbands will get together to talk about some issues that they're facing at the household level. There they've talked a lot about, health issues, pregnancy, children, girls' education, the importance of not marrying off their daughters too early or allowing them to go on to study. And this has been a very interesting model. Again, we've also worked not just in Africa, but many countries in Latin America, in the Caribbean, in Asia. We've worked with religious leaders because in a lot of communities, they have a lot of influence on their communities. And so we've talked to them a lot about, sensitize them to some of the issues. We talk a lot about harmful practices in my organization. Child marriage is one of them. So marrying off, in some places, young girls are married off as young as 12. That's a harmful practice. FGM, which is something that's practiced in a number of countries, which is female genital mutilation or cutting. We've talked a lot about engaging religious leaders to influence communities to stop this practice, et cetera, et cetera. We've worked with the military and armed forces in Lebanon, Turkey, even in Colombia, where we work with armies and militaries so that they train their young recruits, the soldiers, to be aware about, domestic violence, women's rights, supporting their girlfriends and wives, and many different issues around gender equality. And it's worked so well because you have young soldiers who are receptive. As I said, young men are much more open to listening than their older counterparts. So you have these young men who, sort of have to be there, right? Because their generals have told them they have to be in this workshop. But they actually, it does actually sink in these issues when you also talk to them when they're young enough, right? So we've worked a lot with militaries and armies, and that's proven to be quite effective. In Brazil and throughout the Caribbean, for example, we've worked with governments to help set up different public health programs so that men can also feel free to go to a public health clinic to talk about their health issues. Because sometimes this idea of not going to the doctor or not needing a doctor can come with, this idea of being a real man or being strong, or you don't need to see a doctor. So some of these programs, like in Brazil, the Ministry of Health, which is like our Department of Health, set up this whole department that just talks to men, and young men in particular, about their health concerns, and does a lot of outreach so that they can come in and feel free to talk about whatever they want to talk about, whether it's about sexuality or about health concerns, or anything that they may be feeling in terms of their body and issues related to their relationships or partners. Throughout Africa and throughout the world, a lot of young men are rising up and saying, speaking out against violence against women and girls and gender-based violence, which is really heartening to see, because I think young men and boys are really also very, disturbed by some of these things. Just to say, in the UN, we're doing a lot to make sure that all of our work on gender equality is coordinated. I talked about all those agencies. Yeah, imagine we're all doing our own things, and if we're not coordinated, it can be kind of messy. So this swap, as we call it, is meant to bring us all together. The SDGs, which are global goals that the UN has signed on to with governments to commit to addressing these issues, including gender inequality, and more awareness with social media and movements like Me Too and Time's Up and different conversations that people are having, I think is a real positive sign. And this connects to some of your presentation as well. We have to continue to support women and girls' empowerment through education, ensuring they have equal opportunities, make gender equality everyone's business, which I think is very important. So that it's not just the women and girls who are continually talking about this; it's everyone. We also want to make sure sexuality education is something that's accessible, and there, if it's really comprehensive, you will talk about fairness in relationships and power dynamics and all these things. If it's truly a comprehensive program, we have to make sure. Again, I talked about this. Men and boys are engaged to tackle inequality, but in machismo, which is a term that actually comes from Latin America, but also is something we talk about in my line of work because it so nicely sums up what we mean by machismo, which is, this idea of having to be strong and take control and power, and men feel they have to do this. I think this is so important. Make sure that whatever Me Too, Time's Up, all of these movements are talking about are also paying attention to race, paying attention to socioeconomic class, disability, ethnicity, because we want to make sure this is also relatable to women of color, women of different ethnicities and backgrounds. It's not just something that Caucasian women are talking about who are from a particular class. That it's something that speaks to everyone. Just continue to raise awareness at all levels, whether it's in your family, your household, your community, within your state, within your country. So I think raising awareness is critical. Thank you for your attention, guys. I hope that was, interesting. I think we have about 4 minutes for questions, and I stop here and hand it over to you. So the floor is all yours if you have any questions for me. She said, what interested me to take part in this topic? So I'm second generation in this country. My parents emigrated here from Afghanistan. Their parents emigrated from Uzbekistan, which is a country just north of Afghanistan. So I grew up in a community and culture where gender roles and responsibilities and stereotypes were kind of traditional, right? I was lucky enough to have parents I was the only child, so I think my parents were like, okay, we don't have a boy, we have a girl, we have only one kid, let's support her, right? But I think my parents were also very supportive of the idea of me going on to get an education and have a career and so forth. They very much valued family and these things too, but so from a very young age, I saw that girls in my community were maybe treated differently than the boys in their families, and I think I didn't know it at the time, but it instilled this curiosity in me, and it instilled this idea that, hey, wait a minute, if I was a boy, I bet my mom would let me stay out much later than I can, or that I'm allowed to now, but that's a small thing. Or like, you know, my cousin is sort of being pressured to get married very young and not necessarily continue her studies. So on a very personal level, I think I was very curious about these issues. And then once I started studying and I got to learn about all of these statistics, I thought, hey, that's not fair, you know? So then I started working at the UN, and it just sort of picked up from there. But yeah, good question.
Quick question, anybody? Those no rings?
Yes.
How do you help the people who don't admit that they're being abused, either men or women?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, yeah, I
Repeat the
think.
question.
Repeat the question is, how do you support people who don't necessarily admit that they're being abused? You know, that's why awareness and consciousness and reporting is essential. Because if a woman or a woman or a man or a boy or a girl doesn't report that, you can't force them, right? I mean, it's all about their own agency. So what we try to do is just raise awareness so that people are aware that these services are out there and what they're facing is unfair.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, Ms.
all
Lee.
so much.
Thank you, my class. Thank you, Ms. Abuti. Muchísimas gracias. Buenas tardes.